Hi, and welcome. This is No Filter Evaluating Information. I'm Emily Scharf.
And I am Jody Borgerding.
And we're going to spend the next 20 minutes to a half an hour talking to you today about evaluating information and kind of tips and tricks that you can use when you're looking for things for your projects and papers. So I'm going to turn it over to Jody in just a second, but what we're going to talk about specifically is an acronym called the CRAP test, and then we're going to talk about popular sources and scholarly sources and how they look different and how to recognize them. All right.
Thanks, Emily. The CRAP test is a test that you can utilize when you're searching for information on the web. You're going to find a lot of it, but is it credible and reliable? Well, you can take the CRAP test, run the website and the information through the CRAP test to determine if it is a credible and reliable source. So let's go ahead and break this down. C is for the currency or timeliness of the website. How important is it for your topic to have recent information? Science, technology, current events, and health information need to be as recent as possible. So, for example, with the Syrian refugee crisis, it is really important to have the most current, up-to-date information as possible if you are writing a paper or doing a presentation on that topic. However, in some cases, it's all about context. So if you are doing a literary analysis paper, in that case, it may be perfectly acceptable to find and use information from 1996, in this example, about Nathaniel Hawthorne. Some other things to keep in mind is if there is no indication of when a website was created or last updated, that might be a clue that it may not be the most current and timely information possible. Also, when was the site, if the site was created, revised, or updated recently, of course that is going to be key, but also if they are citing sources, if those sources that they are citing are fairly recent. If the website was updated last week, but the information that they are citing is about gun control and the statistics that they're citing are from 2005, 2004, it may not be the most current, timely information available because there's more current stuff out there. Next, let's talk about the relevance. So how is this information, is the information that you need for your topic, how relevant is it? Consider the type of information needed. Are we in need of primary sources or secondary sources, statistics, history, or background information? If the website mentions your topic briefly but not much else, it may not be exactly what you need. It may not have enough information for you. Or if it's exactly on the subject, is there the right amount of information and the right type of information? So for this example, let's say we were needing stock information about Target. The page on the right is directly from Target's corporate website, and it is a tracker of their stock for that particular time that I took this screenshot yesterday afternoon at, I believe, around 2 o'clock Central. So this was the most current, up-to-date information on Target's stock at that moment in time. Whereas the other website is an article from the New York Times from, I believe, last year that is talking about earnings reports and job losses. Now, it does mention a little bit of their stock information, but really the information as a whole is not as relevant as the information from Target that is on the right. Next, we're going to look at authorities. So locate the author or sponsor of a website and just Google them and see what, Google their name to find out what they're all about. Have they published, what else have they published on the topic? Are there any credentials for that person to establish them as an expert? Is the main organization that, and also look at the main organization that provides information about a topic, especially if we're looking at nonprofits. So, for example, the page on the left is from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, a leading research center about emotions and psychology. So this is a very, again, well-known, credible organization and source, and the credentials are clearly given throughout the website that this is an authoritative source. However, on the website on the right, Emotional Geographic, it's a blog about emotions and how to handle and deal with emotions. So it's a little bit harder. It's not as easy to find, or it's not as apparent, the credentials of the author of this blog. They may very well be a psychologist or a counselor, but they probably have not done as much extensive research on the field as the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. If there's no author, or the author is possibly a student or an ordinary person publishing on the web without expertise, or if the organization is not known, these should be clues that the authority of the website should come into question. Next, the accuracy of the website. Are there any sources cited for the information? And are there any images, photos labeled and credited? So another thing to look at is if there are typos, grammar errors, if there's a chart and that the numbers and figures in the chart do not add up. Those are also clear signs that the information is not accurate. To me, even if there are typos, it may be a very well done website, it may be very authoritative and credible and current, but to me, if I see typos, that's a red flag to me, because in my opinion, if they did not take the time to properly proofread the website and find those typos, they probably did not take the time to do good quality research for the results of the website. So things like that should raise some red flags. Also, if there's no information provided or no indication as to where it comes from, that could be a flag that the website may not be as accurate. If there are good lists of sources that can be located and everything is credited and sourced, then that's a good sign. So for these two examples, these are both websites that are not really accurate. The one on the left is a total hoax site. It's designed very well. It references and cites fake research, but just the design of it throws people off because they think, well, it's a very professional looking website. It must be very credible, but it's not. It's a fake hoax website. The one on the right, sweetsurprise.com, it's an interesting one. It talks about myths and facts of high fructose corn syrup and how high fructose corn syrup is good for you, and it's about as equal to table sugar. But the source of the website, the organization putting it on, is the Corn Refiners Association of America. So there's a heavy bias with the website, so they're going to skew the information to fit their agenda. So be careful with that. And lastly, the purpose. So the purpose of this website, or check the purpose of the website. Is the information fact or opinion? Is it stating a point of view, promoting an idea, service, or product? If you need opinions, then consider the author's authority and use their logic and provision of evidence for their opinions. Look at the purpose of the page. If it's presented to give a biased point of view, sell or promote an idea, service, or product, it's not really factual, or there's an imbalanced point of view, or it's a heavy opinion piece and the opinions are not backed up with facts, or the facts are distorted. These should be red flags for your site. If the purpose of the page is to provide information of a scholarly, academic, or at least high quality nature, evidence for any opinions given are factual and presented in numbers and charts, graphs, tables, statistics, there's adequate evidence for their opinion, then this would be a really good website to use. So for this example, I do apologize for it being a little bit cluttered. The one on the left that's partially hidden is from the NRA. So let's say that you are needing, doing some research on gun control. We've got the NRA on the left, and then on the right we've got the Coalition for Gun Violence. These are both very political charged, very biased websites, both for pro-gun regulation and anti-gun regulation. So if you're needing information on gun crime statistics, the NRA, these two organizations may not be the best place to go. A good place to go would just be directly to the FBI. That would be the best place, because the purpose is to provide information in an unbiased format.
Excellent. So again, the thing to remember with what Jody just went through is CRAAP, and if you need a list of questions you can ask yourself to kind of remind yourself how to do this, if you Google CRAPTest CRAAP test, there's lots of great resources out there to help you out. So I'm going to talk just for a few minutes about popular information and scholarly information. So this is often something that your professors will kind of make a distinction, and sometimes for your papers, your professors will ask that you only use scholarly articles. Sometimes they call them peer-reviewed articles or academic articles, or academic journals or scholarly journals. Excuse me. So the difference that we see between the scholarly journals and then any kind of popular information is, for one, kind of the flashiness. So on the screen right now, I have a scholarly article about designing clothes for bicycling. And then on the right, I have an article, just like a buyer's guide for buying bike clothing. And you'll see that, you know, the buyer's guide, they're not necessarily selling you something specific, but they do want you to read that article, and so they have color and pictures, and it looks interesting, whereas the scholarly article on the left is strictly information. Another part that's important about scholarly articles is that you are always going to know who the authors are. So you are always going to have named authors. You will always know their names. And you are going to have what we call their affiliation. So usually that means where they work. Sometimes it's their credentials, meaning what degree they've received, but often it's where they work, and often the place where they work is either a university where they are a professor or a researcher, or something like a think tank or an institute or something like that that's focused on the subject that they write about. So in this case, these are people who work in the Department of Industrial Design, Creative Product Design, and Electronic Commerce. So they are experts in this field that they're writing in. And that's another thing that you are going to see. Scholarly articles are going to be written by people who are experts in the field. So you can ask yourself those CRAPTest questions that Jody talked to you about. You can ask yourself those for articles too. And when it comes to the authors, that would fall under authority. These people are going to be the authority on your topic. The other part of kind of the scholarly articles that is important is, again, the way that they look. So here's just another example of an article from The Guardian newspaper online on the left there, and then a scholarly article on the right. And you'll see there's some footnotes for the scholarly article. Whoops, let's try that again. So you'll see that you always will know where they are getting their information. So these footnotes kind of tell you, you know, their citations. So if a scholarly article has brought in extra information, which it always does, there's going to be citations within the article, and then there's going to be a reference page or a works cited page. So you are going to be able to go through that article and find the information that that author used, and then if you want, you can find it also, and you can use it in your papers. They also sound different. So the language that is used in popular articles and popular newspaper articles online or magazine articles online or in print, it's meant to reach a wide audience. So it's meant to be read by the general public, by anybody who might be interested in that news or that subject. So you get sort of simpler language, terms that everyone can understand. And in a scholarly article, the way that that is written is using a vocabulary that is specific to the discipline that it's written for. So if you are looking at, this article might be in maybe political science or international relations, because it's looking at two countries and how they get along. And so it might be written using vocabulary that you would know if you were studying that discipline, but if you don't study that discipline, it's going to be a little bit harder for you to read. So sometimes scholarly articles are kind of the last place that you go once you've gotten some background information on your topic. So maybe you found some websites that help you learn more about the topic. Maybe you've looked at an encyclopedia or a book and kind of gotten that background information on your topic. And once you have the vocabulary and you know a little bit about it, reading a scholarly article is going to be a little easier because you kind of have a foundation that you've built up, and you can kind of put that information on that foundation. So the other thing that goes along with scholarly information is what is called peer review. So the way that scholarly articles get published is to go through a peer review process. And so what that looks like is a scholar or an expert in that field writes an article, and then one of their peers, so another expert in the field, takes a look at their article and edits it for lots of different things. So they're looking for spelling and grammar mistakes, but they're also looking for accuracy. Maybe you used an incorrect citation and that needs to be changed. They are making sure that the citations that you used are real, that you're not making something up. They're making sure that your information that you have provided, your own knowledge, that sounds accurate and correct. And on the screen, you'll see that sometimes this process is crazy long. So sometimes this process is you turn in your manuscript and it is accepted for peer review and it's reviewed by 2 people. Maybe it's reviewed again by an editor and maybe even a 3rd and 4th reviewer. You then revise it. So you take the feedback that you got from the reviewers and you change your article, and then it goes back to the journal that's going to publish it, and maybe you have to review it again. Sometimes this is a really lengthy process. So the reason that I want to mention this is because sometimes if you are looking at a topic that is kind of brand new, maybe it's in the news right now, maybe it's something new that's happening, there are not going to be scholarly articles about that topic because they haven't had the chance to go through this whole process yet. Maybe there's going to be scholarly articles on a similar topic and you can use that information, but often it's hard to find like the exact perfect article for your topic because you are writing that article. So usually the way that you have to do it, especially with scholarly articles that are on really specific topics, is read a couple of them that are close to your topic and take bits and pieces of information, put them together with your knowledge and what you've learned in your class, and write your paper that way. So the way that you will see these in our databases is often referred to as scholarly peer-reviewed, and then sometimes you'll also see them referred to as academic journals or academic articles. So we've gone through the CRAP test and looked at some questions that we ask ourselves when we're looking at any kind of information, whether it's websites or news articles. or even things that people post on your Facebook that you are questioning if they're real or not. And we've talked a little bit about scholarly sources and scholarly articles and how that whole process works and when you might want to use those. So we're going to put up some contact information. If you are watching this and you have questions or you're not quite sure how to put this information into practice, you can always ask the library for help. That is why we are here, and we're happy to help. So this is our reference desk. You can give them a call or visit this website to send them an email or chat with them or get more information. And then this is Jody's and my contact information. But please get in touch with us if you have any questions. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.